Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports. And the Ospreys currently under the microscope after suggestions about potential manipulation of the rules, inverted commas, potential cheating over the weekend, as well as a cheap shot on Ethan Hooker, which is set to basically end his domestic season and no repercussions, have called into question a lot of the officiating that took place over the weekend. And JP Pietersen has not basically held back in his post-match comments regarding the match itself, and actually made suggestions that Ospreys try to manipulate the system, and spoke about the incident with Ethan Hooker, saying that the protocols were not followed, and as a result, we've got a player who is injured, and basically just sort of continued to add to the frustration of the sort of South African fans, calling for inconsistencies in officiating, and particularly this incident where a Springbok, current Springbok, and a huge part of the season coming up, has basically now had the rest of his domestic season, probably about 6 to 12 weeks potentially, for an injury that could have been prevented, and more frustratingly, was not punished. And when you look at the rules, it was pretty clear cut that there should have been a punishment. It should have been a yellow card at the least. And the fact that no action was taken has caused a lot of supporters to call out and to really sort of take to social media and show their frustration regarding the officiating and the current sort of refereeing climate at the moment. Before we get into it, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. It was not a good weekend for the Sharks, regardless of the circumstances in which they lost the game. But to lose to the Ospreys 21 points to 17 at a time where they desperately need to try and sneak into URC playoffs, it was a bit of a disaster. They now sit languishing in 11th with 34 points. Basically 11 points off the 8th place Bulls, where they want to try and be at. And with only, 3 games remaining of the season, not looking very likely, unless there are some very beneficial results, that they're going to be part of that top 8 and make the Champions Cup, which for a team like the Sharks, quite frankly, is not good enough. And it'll be interesting to see the reaction now towards making the JP Pietersen appointment permanent. He came in, turned things around, things were looking really good. But now things are not looking as good, and all of a sudden, maybe there'll be doubts about whether he can lead this team long term. But let's have a look at some of the comments that he made over the weekend, shall we? And we're going to start with the suggestions that they manipulated some of the rules with regards to the scrums, and basically saying it was almost suspicious in what he did. So this is one coming from an article about Rugby, which quotes him as saying as follows: in the second half, we got more dominance through the scrums. We had an unbelievable 3 scrums where we dominated them and scrummed them off the ball. That was good to see. And obviously, we were 5 meters out from the line. We scrummed them off the ball. We only got a 5-meter scrum back. Then their prop gets injured. To be honest, that is the question mark. We don't know. Did he get injured, or were the Ospreys taking the contest away from us? We were confident of getting a scrum penalty, which probably would have changed the game. We don't know for sure, and I can't talk on behalf of the Ospreys, but it certainly did. Certainly took the contest away from the game, because basically what happened as they made the substitution and there were no other players on the bench who could have come on due to injuries, and as a result they went to uncontested scrums and did lose the scrum as a weapon, which when you're dominating is, we've seen Boks single-handedly win games through their scrum power. So it is really frustrating when you've got that dominance, when you've got the front foot, that all of a sudden something happens and it's taken away from you completely. And the biggest problem is it's this very murky water. Unlike the Ethan Hooker incident, which we'll talk about in a bit, something like this is a difficult one to basically suggest that they're manipulating the rules, because now you're calling into question the legitimacy of an injury, which is always very, very muddy water when you start to say that they don't think a player is actually injured. And the biggest problem is you don't know. You're not a doctor, you can't make a decision, you don't know how he feels. And the problem is when you start to suggest that they are not injured and that they're manipulating the system, you're now suddenly starting to call into question a lot of different people's characters. You're calling into question the character of the medics, of the player, of the coaches, if this is indeed a situation where they are not injured and basically feigning injury to be able to take away the contest. Now, they did have to go down to 14 men, so it wasn't an ideal situation. It's almost it would be quite a big, bold move if that was a case of, at this stage, we'd rather play with 14 and have uncontested scrums than have contested scrums and have this dominance they have. And if we then look at what the Ospreys management said, this is what the head coach had said. He said the medical room is pretty full. He said Gareth Thompson went off with a bump to the head, and he had a little problem with the shoulder as well. So he made the tactical substitution there to try and alleviate that. So tactical sub over there. And he then said, and Gareth's too fast for his own good. He pulled his hamstring when he was scoring the try. To be fair to him, he dug in as long as he could, but clearly couldn't pack down scrum time and couldn't move around the field. That was when he got substitution. It was unsafe for him to be out there, so unfortunately we have to go down to 14. So that poses problems for both sides. We have to deal with it, and thankfully we managed to deal with it with that whole scenario for about 20 minutes. It was tough because you're down to 14 against a very good team. So it would have been quite ballsy, as I said, if that was intentional in terms of making the substitution, going down to 14 and playing with 20 minutes like that, and basically almost sort of saying, well, we still think that's probably a safer option than to continue with the scrum. So I think for this over here, well, it's an interesting one. I think it'll be bold if that was the case. This, however, is a pretty clear-cut scenario. And this is the Ethan Hooker incident. And basically, Ethan Hooker, if you've not seen it, scores this try. I mean, first of all, the pace he's got continues to really surprise people. But it was phenomenal run. And under the poles he goes. Now there you can see, and you can see Ethan Hooker's not happy about it either. So he goes down, and this happens. Now this for me is clearly diving on the player after scoring a try. There is intent. It's not a good. I mean, for example, it's not like he's gone for the ball. It's not like he's gone to do anything. This is completely reckless from a player who should know better. I mean, you could see. I mean, it's not at the same time. He's not even in frame here. You know, he's gone over. There's no chance of anybody stopping, and then bang. And you can see Ethan Hooker's not particularly happy with it, and everybody arrives here, and then all of a sudden he realizes, no, hang on, he's sore. And as it turns out, he has in fact dislocated his shoulder, which means that he will not play for the Sharks again this season and could be up for up to 3 months, depending on the severity of it. Even if it's not a severe injury, we're probably looking at about 6 weeks and maybe a return towards the end of May, beginning of June, hopefully in time for the Springbok season. Now, the comical thing about this is the fact that this was not sanctioned. No penalty, no yellow card, and at this stage, no citing. And I mean, within the citing parameters, there's the whole idea of, was the player injured, which there was. I mean, it's so frustrating when you look at this, for example, he was nowhere near in the frame. And you can see the frustration there from Ethan Hooker. He didn't appreciate it. This is clear cut. And this, when they get the officiating wrong, is why fans get angry. Because this is supposed to be a simple, easy decision to make. And they don't make the decision. And everyone's asking, where's the TMO? Where's the referee? How are we looking and scrutinizing, you know, tries, for example, where we look back at potential forward passes? When it comes to a head contact, we scrutinize every single frame by frame by frame. And then we have something as clear cut as this, they don't even give it a second look. So this is why it gets frustrating. And this is the problem, you know, because I've always been a big ref defender to a certain degree, because we have to have officials in the game. We have to have these sort of, and I don't like people calling them like a necessary evil, because that's, again, the wrong attitude. We have to have officiants. You know, we have to have people who are going to take charge of these games, grab a whistle, and we need to make sure that they are set up for success. And I think that's the biggest issue at the moment, that the laws and the way that rugby is going at the moment is making it very difficult to officiate successfully. And I think the law changes aren't really helping. But the problem is you have instances like this where it looks clear-cut and, you know, then nothing is done. And this becomes really difficult to defend, because you sit there saying the rules are there, the law is there, they didn't apply it. There's a player now who's going to be injured, and nothing is going to happen to the, you know, the player at fault. And for that to be the case is really, really poor. And I think we sometimes get too caught up in maybe the more minor events, inverted commas, you know, so, you know, your forward passes, slightly forward passes, you know, even the head-to-head contact, you kind of look and scrutinize all those things. But we then ignore things like this. And this is, for example, where people want to see action. You know, this is where we need to see them coming out and saying, the referee got it wrong. Here is the citing, here is the sanction, and this is the steps we are going to take to ensure that this does not happen again, because this cannot happen again. So, very, very eventful game. The main thing is that the result does not suit the Sharks. It arguably takes them out of the running for the top 8. And, you know, a yellow card here, for example, contested scrums, that could all have changed the game, because we're talking about a game that, was very close. At the end of the day, there was 4 points in it. They get a penalty try from that the scrum and get 7 points. They arguably win that game. So it's quite a controversial one. It'll be interesting to sort of see how the URC navigates this, because there's a lot of pressure on them from various social media accounts, personalities, journalists, and the likes. I'm sure Sharks will have sent probably a complaint about what's going to happen. What do you think should happen? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.